the Browns are a team that's ready to win. Like can you imagine if they had Matt Ryan at quarterback? I think they'd win a lot more games. Kirk Cousins even I'd feel better about than Baker Mayfield. What
Oh,
do
yeah,
you want? Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
I was just saying,
what do you want your team to do?
Make the playoffs.
Yeah, so you think Kirk would like save him? So what do you want him to do at quarterback? Do you want him to get someone to compete with Baker, trade Baker, what?
They got to do something, right? They got to do because one thing with Baker Mayfield is the floor, right? I've said this for a while. The ceiling is not a problem with Baker Mayfield, right? When Baker's playing good, he's playing good enough, right? That he's not like the best quarterback in the NFL, but he's definitely like good enough to win with, right? Like he's at that Matt Stafford kind of level where it's like, hey man, he'll have some hot games, he'll have some okay games, but he's not gonna be a burden on your playoff chances or on your Super Bowl hopes when he plays good. The problem is that when he's bad, he's awful. Like he's not just bad, he's awful. And it can get out of control, right? Like if you look at PFF grades and QBR, if you point out the games in each that say that he has sub-starting games, if you look at the 2019 year in the 2021 years where he was bad, it was like 11-10 starts that are below a starting level. If you look at the good years he's had 2018 and 2020, it's only like 6 starts that were bad below a starting level, and that's on par with like a guy like Russ. I think the Browns, like if an upgrade's available, if you feel like you can get to the Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins, yeah, make the move. I don't think there's much to worry about moving up off. I have questions. Like if Kirk Cousins came here, I know we would make the playoffs. I don't know what we would do in the playoffs, but I know we would make the playoffs, right?
Here's my question, if I may. Would you make a Matthew Stafford level trade where you're like, we'll give you 2 firsts and Baker for Kirk?
Oh, for Kirk?
I know that sounds insane, but would you do that? If you thought that would get you to a Super Bowl the same way the Rams did, would you make that trade? Because undeniably, the Browns roster is incredible. Like they're ready to win. They just need the quarterback. Would you trade your future and your quarterback for Kirk Cousins?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one too, because Kirk's getting up there in age too. He's like 34.
So Stafford.
Some guys really.
How bad do you want that Super Bowl?
That's what I'm saying. Like if I just see. That's a good comparison though. Him and Stafford, they're pretty similar.
Kirk's numbers are better actually.
Yeah.
If you look at Kirk's numbers historically, like they're actually like slightly better. Which numbers aren't everything. Good.
And his help has been worse. If you look at it, people don't understand. But Kirk, the last 4 years, has not had an offensive line that ranked higher in PFF and pass blocking than like 27th.
And what do the Browns have? A great offensive line.
Yeah, so you can kind of suggest that would be, I don't know, but the idea of trading 2 firsts for Kirk Cousins, I like. You know what I mean?
It's just bad PR.
That's a tough pill to swallow. Hey, that's one of those situations where you could be right tomorrow, but you're gonna be wrong the day you do it. Like everybody's gonna pan that if you do it, but you might be right. But it's not gonna be great the day you make that trade, right? If it were like somebody like Russ, obviously, oh yeah, heartbeat, you'll do that. Like not even question it, or even Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that. Yeah, of course, you would do that. With Kirk, because if that don't work, you're the team that traded 2 firsts for Kirk Cousins at age 34. Like, that's the only tough part of that. But do I think the Browns would, if they felt like they could get Kirk Cousins for a reasonable compensation? I think Kevin would want to do it because Kirk is who Kevin wants at quarterback, a guy who's going to take care of the football, not make too many mistakes, not going to do too much, but also not going to do too little. That's exactly what Kevin wants. And Baker kind of has some tendencies that are in opposition of what Kevin wants to do because Baker's a gunslinger. He wants to throw the ball downfield. Kevin don't want to risk it, so it's an interesting proposition. I don't know. I got to think about that. 2 firsts for Kirk Cousins, though.
What I hear you. It sounds crazy, but I don't think the Vikings want to get rid of him. So you got to convince them to do that. And this just popped in my head. I'm like, well, could you compare that to Stafford? And I think it comes down to when you look back. 5 years from now, you look back on this Browns team, which is we both agree it's like a really good football team, and you're a quarterback short. Would you rather say we tried everything we could and didn't work? Or we were too afraid to take the risk and trade 2 first-round picks, which may or may not work out to get the guy that might put us over the top to win a Super Bowl. I would way rather them put all their chips on the table the same way the Rams did. It's just how much confidence do you have in your team around Kirk? And I'll say this, man. Again, I'm not really. I feel like I'm making it sound like I think it's a great idea. I think it's like a mediocre, like 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10 idea. But I would love to see Kirk Cousins play with a good offensive line, which we haven't seen in a long, long time. So
yeah, it's
I'm like, man,
his
I don't know.
First year in Washington that he had a good offensive line, but yeah, it's an interesting proposition there because you could make the argument that Kirk is going to be a much better, like Kirk is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield, like right now, absolutely. Like Kirk Cousins much better.
And he's better than most people available. Like, who else is available? Mitchell Trubisky, Case Keenum. Like, what are your options? If you don't get Russ or Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson, which I don't think either of them are an option, it's like Matthew Stafford is really expensive and probably not going to get moved, or Kirk Cousins, maybe if you can convince them to make that trade. Who else is available? I don't think anyone else is. And the the Browns have a quarterback problem. And I'm sorry, but Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, they're not going to solve that problem. They're just not. So
yeah, at least not this year. You know what I mean? They're not those kind of prospects. Yeah, I mean, like with Kirk. Oh man, that's just that's a gamble. It is a gamble, but you know it is the best possible gamble. You could also probably throw Derek Carr in there. Derek Carr's probably just as shaky, right? He's a
They're
little
not
bit
moving
younger.
him though. Good luck getting him out of there.
Who knows? It's the Raiders. They will do something.
So
out the blue,
same
you know
proposition. I mean? 2 firsts and Baker Mayfield for Derek Carr. Would you?
Are they going to take Baker?
Yeah, they're going to take Baker.
Derek Carr? I would consider that. I would strongly consider that.
You would rather have Derek Carr than Kirk Cousins?
I think that Derek Carr has been in worse situations than Kirk and gotten more out of them than Kirk. And I think that I trust Derek Carr at the end of games a level more than I do Kirk. I don't think Derek will put up better numbers over a year than Kirk. Like if Kirk Cousins came here, he will have like MVP type numbers if he came here and just played in the Browns offense and just, you know, they drafted a wide receiver and just threw that there with him and then boom. I think he'll have like an MVP level statistical year. Nobody's going to vote for him, but like he'll be in the conversation. If Derek Carr came here, I think I would have more confidence at the end of games, right? That's my worry with Kirk. Are we going to trade 2 first-round picks for like a fourth quarter interception in the wild card round? You know what I mean? Like it gets like that with Kirk, right?
Yeah,
like because when
it
gets shaky with him, he starts to panic. You see his feet chopping. He got that Jimmy Garoppolo in him, right? When you knew Jimmy was going to throw a pick at the end of the game because you saw how choppy his feet started to get. You're like, oh, he's jumpy. He's going to throw an interception. Like we all know when that's going to happen. With Derek, that doesn't happen to him. So I would be more confident in that. Also, he's younger, right? So you don't worry about, because like sometimes guys play till they're 40 in the NFL. And then you have Joe Flacco's and Andy Dalton's who went from starting quarterbacks to relative like backups like in a year, right? Like when they turn 32 each, they just fell off a cliff, right? So you don't know which one you're getting with that. Kirk at 34, I'm a little bit nervous about it. I would be less nervous about Derek Carr at 30 because I know that Derek's going to be better in them fourth-quarter situations. I think Derek would benefit from being in a situation with the Cleveland Browns where you're going to have a good defense, you're going to have a really good offensive line, you're going to have a great run game, and you're going to have good support. And you're in a system that accentuates the strengths of Derek Carr, which is he has great arm talent. He's not going to be the most risky guy with the football. He's going to take some checkdowns, and we have elite checkdown guys for Derek Carr. So I would be more comfortable about it with Derek Carr just because, I don't know, there's less of a stigma with him as well.
Well, so Kirk legitimately, in my opinion, has like an anxiety problem where in big moments, I think he tenses up rather than being that kind of guy with swagger who's relaxed. Derek Carr, Kirk is a nerdy Midwest dude. Derek Carr like actually legitimately has swag and like is comfortable and confident and cool and relaxed. And I'd feel better about Derek Carr running my football team than Kirk Cousins. By the way, I'm curious. I hate saying the name Kirk Cousins. No shade, no offense to him. But like it just does not come out of the mouth very easily. Am I wrong about that? Like Kirk Cousins is just a clunky name.
It's one of those names that you could use for like comedic effect too. It's like, come on, Kirk Cousins. Like, it's just real funny to say Kirk Cousins in a way. It's like he's Kirk Cousins. Like, that's what you get. He gonna go Kirk. Captain Kirk. Like, his nickname is hilarious. Like, it's just you ever have one of those guys like you meet at work and like an office scenario and they have a name and it just feels real good to say like shut up plus their name. It's like, shut up, Kirk. It just feels good. You know what I mean? Like, it just don't make sense, but it just feels good to just be like, oh yeah, here come Kirk Cousins. Like, it's just a funny name. And Derek Carr, like you don't hear as many of the jokes with him. But it's the same thing with Matthew Stafford, right? Like, Matthew Stafford was the king of like, oh, he's good. Look, Matthew Stafford going to have 3 games where you don't believe he's Matthew Stafford no more, but he will remind you at some point. That's Matthew Stafford, right? Like, not like he's terrible, but Matt's going to have those stretches where he has like 3 great games. And you're like, yeah, he's top 5. And then he has like a 2-pick-6 game. You're like, oh yeah, I forgot Matt does this too.
Yeah, that Titans game was brutal. Did you watch the Titans-Rams game this year?
Oh, yeah, he had a couple of them. He had like 3 of them in a row this
passes,
year, right?
Man, yeah. He threw a pick 6 and then another interception like on back-to-back passes, and you're like, Jesus Christ, like what is happening with this guy?
That's been Matt Stafford his whole career, though. It's like, and people forget, and I think it's going to get rewritten because he won the Super Bowl. And good on him, right? He's going to probably get into a Hall of Fame because of that. But, people forget. I get people on Twitter telling me he was top 5 or top 7. I'm like, when Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, like when legitimate superstars were in the league, you telling me he was top 5 in that era? No, that's ridiculous. Like, Matt Stafford has always been the dude that, like, you kind of worry about him messing it up at the end of the day.
That's why I would
what
say
the Rams were worried about
in
the 3rd quarter of that Super Bowl was Matt Stafford messing it up, because there's nothing that explains them running the ball for inches of grass with Cam Akers, not getting nothing all game. Sam Hubbard's been in their backfield all game, but Sean McVay don't want to throw the ball because he knows that there's not enough wide receiver play out here to save him. So he's like, man, let me not have Kirk Cousins happen to me. Not Kirk Cousins. Let me not have Matthew Stafford have one of them Matthew Stafford games. You know what I mean? No disrespect to him. It's just, you got to worry about that because he's more than capable of throwing that thing up. He had, 2 interceptions. They weren't bad interceptions in the Super Bowl, but they were still just like, it's just, it was tough. But, Matt Stafford's going to throw you an interception. I get nervous if I had Matt Stafford on my team and he had not thrown an interception in a while going into a big game, because that tells me he's due. I get the same feeling with Baker Mayfield. I'm like, man, he ain't thrown an interception in like 8 weeks and we go into a playoff game. I'm worried because I know that he's going to throw an interception. Like, it's one of those things. You're going to regress to the mean eventually.
It's when, not if. Well, that's what I say. I think trading for Kirk Cousins is equally crazy as trading for Matthew Stafford. Like, if you look at it and you fail with Matthew Stafford, can you imagine the criticism they would have gotten if he, like, against the Buccaneers had 4 interceptions and they lost, or 2 pick sixes or something crazy, and you're like, you really traded away your quarterback and 2 first-round picks, your future, for Matthew Stafford, and it didn't work out. It's the same proposition with Kirk Cousins. Like, it's equally, quote, crazy if it doesn't work, but it did work. And maybe it could work for the Browns. I don't know what else the Browns are going to do, and Kirk really might be their best option.
I would say the one difference between Kirk and Matt is, like, when Matt has a meltdown, it's not because it's the 4th quarter. You know what I mean? Like, it's just because he's having a terrible game. Like, it starts out bad, it ends bad, it just is bad, the whole thing, right? So you don't think his issues are 4th quarter related. That's the same thing with Derek Carr. Derek Carr is more than capable of having a meltdown too, right? People just don't know about it because they ain't been paying attention about the Raiders. But he will have some bad games throughout the year, right? But they're not bad games because he was in a clutch situation. They're just bad games. The thing about Kirk is when he has bad games, it's like because he's on prime time, or it's like it's the 4th quarter and he tried to do too much and then he started forcing it. Like, that worries me more with Kirk, where I'm like, why do these things happen?
The amount of, like, crucial interceptions kill me, man. We're Kirk Cousins. 4th down, end of the game, you got the ball, down 4, chance to win, pick 6, and you're like, of course. Yeah. How many times that happened?
It's happened a lot with Kirk. It's happened a lot with Baker, right? Well, not with the pick sixes, but where he's thrown a last drive interception, right? I think, the shocking thing to look at it when you look at the 4th quarter splits, Kirk Cousins looked like Tom Brady's next to Baker Mayfield's trailing and behind 4th quarter. Like, honestly, like, they're bad splits for Baker Mayfield there. I was unaware of how awful it was until I saw it. So, you got a problem there. It's like it would be less of a problem than what you have with Baker Mayfield at the end of those games. But it's still going to be an issue. Again, Kirk Cousins, I would feel great. Absolutely. No doubt in my mind. The Browns would probably be favorites to win the division. They would definitely be in the playoffs, probably get to the divisional round. But after that, I would have major concerns about, how far they can go with Kirk Cousins. Derek Carr, I feel like if you get him here and he plays well enough for you to get to the playoffs, probably can get to the Super Bowl with him, right? Like, you probably unlock something there.
Let me rationalize it further. I'm sorry to double down, but I have to. So you trade 2 firsts and Baker for Kirk Cousins. If you trade 1 first for Kirk, you're still going to be a good football team. So the next 2 draft picks are probably going to be late first-round picks anyway. So let's assume you're giving up the 23rd through 32nd round, overall pick. I don't know why you wouldn't give up 2 of those to get Kirk Cousins. I mean, what I'm hearing from you is it's going to solve a lot of their problems. And if you think about, what are you really giving up? It sounds bad, but oh no, you gave up the 27th overall pick and then the 30th overall pick, and you didn't win a Super Bowl, but you got a great quarterback and you went a lot farther than you would have anyway. Am I making sense?
Oh, you make sense, but you forget this team's in Cleveland, man. Like things just go wrong. That's what we have to factor in, right? If we trade for Kirk Cousins, the logical thing is that that's what's going to happen. But it can also be that he just falls off a cliff. He's terrible, and we gave away the first overall pick for Kirk Cousins. That's why I say.
Oh no! Yeah, you're right. You're totally right, though.
Yeah, and this is why I say if I'm Andrew Berry, you gotta be aware of that when you go into these trade negotiations. Because look, man, a first round pick from us ain't the same thing as a first round pick from Pittsburgh because you playing the lottery with the Browns' first round pick. This first round pick might get you 30 in 2023. It might get you Bryce Young. You know what I mean? It could be either way. So one of our first round picks are worth 2 of any other franchise's first round picks because it can just go wrong. With Kirk Cousins, I do not put it above Kirk Cousins to fall into the hole that has been bad luck in Cleveland and just end up falling off a cliff. That's why the age worries me with him a bit more. You know what I mean? Because I'm it's Cleveland. It could go bad in a certain amount of ways, and you have to be aware of that. And that's where I'm nervous. It's man, that Kirk Cousins trade could be a disaster. And since it's Kirk Cousins, it will never be a disaster that people forget. You make that trade for Derek Carr, people will be like, oh, you took a chance on a young guy. You make that trade for Kirk Cousins at 34 and he fall off a cliff, you're going to be the idiots that traded for a 34-year-old Kirk Cousins and gave away 2 top 10 picks for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Derek Carr, look at how wrong things went last year in Vegas, and they still made it to the playoffs. Derek Carr clearly can handle anything.